All right, Canes fans, Peter Ariz here alongside D Money, bringing you yet another instant reaction podcast here as Miami continues to do work in the transfer portal. And this is a big one on the defensive line. Again, this podcast brought to you by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. D, I'm very excited about this pickup. Tyler Barron, former Tennessee player, was at Louisville this spring, and a guy who is a big time NFL talent. Excited about what he could bring to this defensive line.
Oh yeah, look, if you're talking about adding players in the portal, you added Martinez and a ton of other names. I would say Barron's the closest to Martinez as far as being a college star player that is already proven at that level, joining the Miami Hurricanes. This is someone at Pete, you can pull up the link. CBS Sports named their top 100 players in college. We made a whole video about that a week ago or so ago. I made a post on the website talking about Miami's players: Xavier Estrepo, Ruben Bain, Cam Ward, Francis Mauanoa. They were top 100 players. Tyler Barron was ranked as the number 70th player in the country on that list right now in college. This is a proven player, 6'4", 260. He's about to turn 23 during the 24 season. So this is a veteran player who's played 4 years in the SEC. Look at the career numbers in the Southeastern Conference. You're talking about 101 tackles, 27 tackles for loss, 13 and a half sacks. Again, that's 4 years in the SEC. Completely looks the part. Pete, your boy Jim Nagy had him as a Senior Bowl midseason All-American. Just an absolute stud player who we will break down his game. But, in terms of the player, this guy's at the top of the line. There's some injury concerns, which Miami was very well aware of with his shoulder. Well, it's been reported at this point. We'll talk about that. So it's not, it's not as clean as you'd love it to be, but the player is an absolute impact guy.
Yeah, and here's the tweet from Jim Nagy, director of the Senior Bowl, who was talking about him last year. He was a Senior Bowl midseason All-American, so squarely on the radar of the NFL. 6'4" and a half, 260 pounds, 33 and 5/8 inch arms. So these are verified measurables, D. To me, he's a guy on tape. I mentioned it the other day when his name first surfaced. Reminded me a little bit shorter, I think, than a Jermaine Johnson from Florida State, who ended up being a first-round pick, but plays with a ton of power on tape.
And similar to Martinez, that when Martinez came on his visit, the coaches looked at each other and they were like, wow, this guy looks the part. I'm told it was the same thing with Barron, that this guy physically just blew everybody away, and he looks exactly like what you want. Now, background, I mentioned this earlier. This is well reported, so I feel comfortable talking about it. He has an issue with his labrum that was discovered at Louisville. He was He was committed to Ole Miss, went to Louisville, entered the portal, now coming to the University of Miami. There is an issue with his labrum. Miami was well aware of it. They went in there with their eyes wide open, and obviously they are comfortable with it, which is why Barron is joining the team. And what he brings is just tremendous upside. You already have Ruben Bain, one of the best pass rushers in the country. Again, another player on this top 100 list of college football players. Yeah, you have Akeem Messidor, very good player when healthy. You have Elijah Alston, a top-rated pass rusher in the portal when he came out per Pro Football Focus. So Barron just adds to that with another NFL quality guy. He played a lot of 4-eye at Tennessee, lined up right in front of the tackle. He's going to play more edge here and the ability to get on the edge and use his pass rush ability. Also played some defensive tackle at Tennessee in pass rush situations. So a lot of versatility. If Coach Guidry wants to have Barron, Messidor, Bain, Alston all in the field, you have enough versatility with those guys that you can do it. Barron scored a touchdown last year on a recovery, played some tight end in high school. As we go through his high school highlights, this guy is just a super versatile, talented player and really can make an impact on this front.
And it's been an interesting journey for him. Obviously, was at Tennessee the last few years, and then was actually committed to Ole Miss before ending up at Louisville for this quick period of time, and now coming to Miami here. But I think it's a theme we're going to see with a lot of these transfers who are coming in to try to I'll cash it in, so to speak, for the next level, maximizing what the most they can get out of a talent like this, assuming health wise you can get him to where he needs to be. But a Jalen Phillips, that situation comes to mind as a guy who was at UCLA. Obviously, Miami comes to Miami, kind of shell of himself, right? And I'm not saying that's what the situation is with Barron, right? But gets himself where he needs to be and ends up being a first round pick, right? So this would not be the first time that something like this happened recently in Miami.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure he has the athleticism of Jalen Phillips, which is rare, rare, rare. I mean, top of the NFL level. Um, but I agree. It's a similar situation in that I remember talking to people when Jalen Phillips was on his visit, and they were saying, like, look, we don't know if this guy's ever going to play football again. It's not like they, you know, knew that this guy was ready to go. And of course, it all worked out with Barron, the injury situation. They knew about it going in with their eyes wide open. He's 23 years old, going to be during the season. So if they didn't think he could play this season and help them this season, they wouldn't be taking him. But I think this addition is just because of the position, which is defensive line, a position you need to rotate, a position you need to have high level athletes and body types to be in the college football playoff picture. We've talked about all the great teams that have played in that college football playoff. They all have NFL bodies all over that defensive line. It's a prerequisite. It's a table stakes for being a championship type team in college football. He brings that, the ability to rotate again and be part of a wave, and then the maturity physically. You don't want young. You signed the best defensive line class in the country. Your Miami Hurricanes with Armando Blunt, Justin Scott, Marquise Lightfoot, guys like that, Artavius Jones, Booker Pickett. But this is a grown man position, defensive line. You do not want to rely on true freshmen at that spot, no matter how talented they are. So when you bring in a talent like a Tyler Barron, he is not just a guy with ability. He's a guy who is 260 pounds, 23 years old during the season. He has a mustache, like they say. He is ready to play big time football. He had 4 years of production in the SEC. He's ready to rock. You don't have to wait for him to get rolling.
I wanted to bring the tweet up again from Senior Bowl director Jim Nagy, because something that he says here is, we value what our former players think about college teammates. And reigning NFL Rookie of the Week, Byron Young, who ended up having 8 sacks this year for the Rams, spoke. He said he gave him the heads up about Barron last February. So this would have been almost a year, 14, 15 months ago that he was put on the radar of scouts, right? So this just goes to show you, again, if you can get him close to 100% here, you could have a legitimately special talent on your hands.
No doubt about it. And I think the risk is well outweighed by the reward. And people say, well, you already have Messidor, you already have Bain. Remember, those guys can play inside, as can Barron. He did that. So you can play them together, you can rotate, you can do a lot with those guys. And as far as the young players, you have Marquise Lightfoot, you have Cole McConaughey, you have Booker Pickett. These are young players. You do not want to rush those guys onto the field if you don't have to. Booker Pickett, Marquise Lightfoot both need to gain weight. McConaughey, he's still a young player, still adjusting, although all those guys have a lot of talent and you're excited about them. Big time programs, you have veteran depth. Look, Miami Hurricanes, when they won the national championship, you didn't just have your Jerome McDougal, your Andrew Williams. You also had your Jamal Green, Cornelius Green, guys like that, helping you out with your depth at defensive end, grown man bodies, waves of them, talented guys, waves. That was really the name of the game. And again, when you watch this guy's huddle, he's from the Knoxville area. You see why he was a 4-star recruit out of high school. You see the strength, the spin move, the ability. He's playing tight end. He's playing defensive end. It's not just pure speed. It's not just pure power. It's not just pure technique. This is a very, very complete player. And a lot of people think he has upside when he moves from that 4-eye, just standing right in front of the offensive tackle and kind of fighting him and doing that hand-to-hand combat, that battle, and move more to the edge where he can use his athleticism and beat guys a little bit with some of that. So excited to see what he brings. And Pete, I know we watched the UTSA game a couple days ago. You were raving about this guy.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that stood out to me, and it's a phrase you hear evaluators at the NFL level talk about all the time, is heavy hands, right? It pops off the screen. His motor as well, right? I mean, the ability for him to maybe not even get the sack, right, but disrupt the play negatively. And the UTSA game, it was UTSA, right? So he should be doing that against that competition. But how many times over the last few years have we had guys like we saw with Ruben Bain last year dominating who he should be dominating? But when you have pass rushers that you think highly of and look for them to do something at the next level, they need to dominate every game they play in, right? So I think that was an issue. Not to get too far on a tangent here, but what we saw with Leonard Taylor's issues and why he slid and went undrafted, right? Because the motor wasn't consistently there. This guy, to me, again, I keep having the caveat: if he's healthy, then Miami, I think out of all these guys that they're landing in this wave, right, he excites me to a level that I think he could be a real game changer for this defense.
Absolutely. And look, I know that there was a talk about he's only getting a sacks, or the majority of his sacks are not an SEC play, at least as a senior. He had plenty of sacks earlier in his career against SEC. His senior year, more of the sacks came against lesser teams, which, by the way, is not unusual because the good pass rushers tend to pad their stats in those games. But also, he went against Virginia, which is an ACC opponent, as a senior, and he was SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week that week because he destroyed Virginia, completely dominated them. So who's he going to be playing in the ACC? And by the way, he's going to be playing a Virginia. Let's say he plays a Virginia type team. That tackle's already worn out by Ruben Bain and Messidor by the time he gets in. Or if he's starting, it's going to be the weaker tackle because they're with less help because they're worried about Ruben Bain. So he's going to have an opportunity to bully some weaker guys, and he's shown that that is a mismatch when he gets put in that position.
State guys are going to be visiting campus here in the near future, so stay tuned. Keep it locked to Canes Insight. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, as we have been putting out all these instant reaction, emergency podcasts to these big pickups. D, any last thoughts on this one here?
No, you don't make these moves to win 9 games or 8 games. You make these moves to win 10 games, to dominate Florida's weak offensive line, to dominate FSU's mediocre offensive line from what I saw in the spring game, to get to the college football playoff and now compete with real good offensive lines. So I think this move gives you a chance to take control of the state, take control of the ACC, and then go to the playoffs with a defensive end rotation that can compete with any team in the nation.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this edition of the Canes Insight podcast. Big pickup here. Keep it locked on Canes Insight. Go Canes. All right. I need you to do that again, D. You were muted. The Canes were a shout out.
Shout out to Canesware. Go Canes.